Today's tale takes us to the peaceful town of Hexham, in Northumberland, England, a place of cold, misty air, narrow streets, and old stone houses whose histories run deeper than the foundations they stand upon. In the early 1970s, two children would make a discovery so strange, so unsettling, that it would ignite decades of supernatural claims, scientific debate, and fear that something ancient had awakened. Hexham, 1971. The kind of neighborhood where every house looked friendly, where children played freely in the streets, and where the passing of cars felt like an event rather than routine. Winter was dragging itself into early spring, leaving the soil damp, cold, and dark. It was in this brittle air that Colin Robson, 11 years old, and his younger brother, Leslie, began digging in their backyard. The boys were searching for worms to use as fishing bait. Their mother, Ellen Robson, remembered hearing their footsteps racing out the back door shortly after breakfast. The earth was soft enough to scoop by hand. The boys spread patches of mud and clay around the garden as they dug deeper, their small fingers scraping against roots, stones, and damp soil. And then, something unusual appeared. Colin's hand brushed against a round, chalky surface, not quite stone, not quite clay, but something hardened. Foreign, he dug around it, revealing the top of what looked like a carved head, its face simple but unmistakable. Crude eyes, a tiny mouth, and a skull-like oval. Moments later, Leslie unearthed an almost identical figure, two small stone-hewn heads, each roughly the size of an orange. The boys shouted for their mother, but at first she dismissed the excitement. Kids found odd things in gardens, all the time bottle caps, pottery fragments, even pieces of brick they believed were fossils. But when the brothers burst into the kitchen holding the heads, mud dripping onto the linoleum floor, Ellen froze. There was something wrong about them. They were cold, far colder than the surrounding soil should have made them. The texture was inconsistent smooth. In some places, jagged and rough in others, and the faces slightly asymmetrical, almost disturbing in their simplicity, like primitive masks used for rituals no one spoke about anymore. The boys placed the heads on the counter. Ellen didn't want them in the house, but curiosity mixed with a quiet Annie skepta from ordering the boys to take them back outside. That night, something shifted in the home. Ellen later stated that the atmosphere grew heavier, as if moisture had thickened the air. The house creaked unusually, wooden frames groaning at irregular intervals. The family dog, normally silent, began pacing the hallway, whining at the corners of rooms, as if reacting to a presence unseen. But the first major incident came 3 nights after the discovery. Around 3 a.m., Ellen woke to the sound of shuffling, soft, deliberate, almost cautious. At first she blamed the dog, but the weight of the sound. It was too heavy, too measured. It had intention. Then came the footsteps. Slow, creeping, moving down the hallway toward the bedrooms. She rose from bed, trembling. Every hair on her body stood on end. As she opened her door, she saw a shape in the dark. Small, humanoid, its outline distorted by the shadows. It froze when it noticed her, and then it darted into the bathroom, slamming the door so hard the mirror rattled. Ellen ran after it, heart pounding. But when she flung the door open, it was empty. Completely. The only thing inside was the faintest smell of damp soil, and the two heads resting on the windowsill exactly where the boys had left them, staring blankly into the room. Ellen did not sleep at all that night. She'd later tell investigators it looked like a small man, but twisted, like an animal trying to imitate a person. This was only the beginning. The Robson household grew steadily more tense, as if the heads were disrupting the natural rhythm of the home. Things moved on their own, not dramatically, just enough to unsettle. A chair slightly shifted position. A cabinet door left ajar when no one had touched it. Shoes appearing in different rooms. And always that feeling of being watched, observed from corners, stairwells, darkened hallways. One evening, when the wind outside was howling through the trees, Ellen placed the heads inside a drawer to get them out of sight. But at around midnight, she awoke to the unmistakable clatter of objects falling onto the kitchen floor. She hurried downstairs, The drawer was open. The heads were lying on the ground. No one in the family admitted touching them. The dog refused to enter the kitchen from that night onward. But the most disturbing incident occurred when the Robsons' daughter, Marion, returned home from university, visiting for a long weekend. She was told of the strange activity, but brushed it off as superstition. She even joked about the heads being Hexham's newest pets. That night, Marion slept in her childhood bedroom. Around 4 a.m., she jerked awake to a scratching sound. It was faint at first, like something brushing against the carpet. She thought she was dreaming, turned over, and closed her eyes. But the scratching grew louder. When she finally forced herself to look, she saw a shape at the foot of her bed. A small figure, crouched. Its silhouette barely visible in the dim blue light bleeding through her curtains. It stood no more than 3 feet tall. Its head was too large, its limbs were thin and slightly crooked, and it was breathing shallow, rapid breaths like a frightened animal. Frozen in terror, Marion didn't move, but the figure did. Slowly, it tilted its head. She could feel it studying her, its presence suffocating. Then, in a jerky motion, it scurried backward toward the bedroom door, its movements unnatural like joints bending the wrong way. By the time Ellen reached Marion's room after hearing the scream, the creature was gone. But Marion's expression told her everything. Something had been in that room with her. Something alive. If the family had hoped things would improve, they were wrong. Over the next few days, the activity escalated into knocking on walls, doors opening on their own, and shadows darting around corners. Finally, terrified and desperate, Ellen contacted local academics, hoping someone could identify the heads and perhaps explain the disturbances. What she didn't know was that attention would only bring more chaos and far darker theories. If you're enjoying this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to follow our next mysteries. News of the strange stone heads began attracting local curiosity. Journalists, folklorists, and archaeologists wanted to examine the artifacts. Many simply didn't believe Ellen's claims, assuming the events were exaggerated or imagined. Among the first experts to show interest was Dr. Anne Ross, a respected Celtic historian known for her research into ancient pagan rituals and artifacts. Ross had spent her career studying carvings, idols, and effigies from Britain's ancient tribes. When the heads arrived at her home for examination, she immediately noticed that their style resembled Celtic cult objects, possibly votive offerings or protective charms. Their simplistic features reminded her of artifacts from Iron Age shrines, though their exact purpose remained unclear. Ross kept the heads overnight, planning to study them further in the morning. But that night, she experienced something she would later recount with unwavering certainty. Around 2 a.m., she awoke to the sensation of movement in her bedroom. At first, she thought it was her daughter, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight filtering through the curtains, she saw a figure, and it wasn't human. It was small, crouched, exactly as the Robsons had described. It stood in the corner, its body slightly contorted, its eyes if they were eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. Ross later told colleagues it was a half-animal, half-human creature, a grotesque form. It ran past my bed with incredible speed. The creature fled the room, sprinting down the stairs. Ross heard it moving through the house, footsteps that were light but frantic, as though the being was desperate to escape. When she pulled open her bedroom door, she saw nothing but the stillness of her dark hallway. But the heads had moved. She had placed them on her office table. Now they sat on the floor near the doorway, positioned as though waiting for her. Shaken, Ross returned the heads to the Robson family immediately. Her professional opinion was unprecedented. Whatever these heads are, they are connected to something old, something that still has influence. As publicity spread, another figure entered the story. Professor Frank Hyde, an expert in geology and ancient craftsmanship. Hyde believed the disturbances were psychological, not supernatural. He insisted on taking the heads for analysis, confident that scientific examination would reveal them as modern toys or crude amateur but when Hyde brought them home, his confidence faltered. The first night, he heard scratching noises along the skirting boards. The second night, his cat bolted from the living room, hissing at something Hyde could not see. By the third night, he reportedly saw a shape moving in the hallway, small, hunched, its limbs oddly jointed. He never publicly admitted to seeing the creature, but his wife told reporters, "Frank doesn't believe in ghosts, but whatever he saw, it frightened him to the core." As the case gained attention, theories emerged. Theory 1. Ancient Celtic guardians. Some believe the heads were protective idols placed to guard the land. Removing them disturbed something bound to the earth. Theory 2. Pagan effigies used in rituals. Others argued they were ritualistic objects used to summon or bind spirits or something worse. Theory 3. Modern hoax. A neighbor, Day Craigie, eventually claimed he made the heads as toys for his daughters, but his story shifted repeatedly, and the style didn't match home crafting materials. Many consider this confession a way to diffuse fear. Theory 4. The Hexham wolf. Locals whispered about a mythic wolf-like creature said to haunt the region centuries earlier. Some witnesses insisted the creature they saw resembled a wolf-human hybrid, possibly tied to ancient shape-shifting folklore. No theory fully explained the events. No two experts agreed on their origin, yet multiple households completely independent of one another reported the same creature, the same footsteps, to some a fear. Something was connected to those heads, and that something moved when they moved. Eventually, after years of debate and inconsistent claims of ownership, the Hexham Heads were transferred to a university lab toward the late 1970s. Scientists attempted to run thorough tests, but the results were very old, but not ancient. Handmade but not easily attributed to any specific period. Celtic in style but not definitively Celtic in age. The mystery deepened when the heads suddenly disappeared from storage. No record of where they went, no confirmation of who removed them, no evidence of theft. They simply ceased to exist in the academic world. But the activity didn't stop altogether. 4 years afterward, scattered reports from northern England describe sightings of a strange humanoid creature, small, malformed, fast-moving, lurking near wooded areas and old stone walls. Most witnesses never knew about the Hexham Heads, yet their descriptions matched those of the Robson, the Ross family, and the Hydes. To this day, the original heads have never They could be in a private collection, they could be buried again. Or they could be somewhere far darker, far quieter places where no one would think to look. And the creature, whether guardian, spirit, or something that defies explanation, has become one of the UK's most chilling unsolved supernatural cases. Some believe the heads awakened it, others believe the heads bound it. But most unsettling of all, some believe the creature was never tied to the heads at all, that the heads simply allowed people to see it. The mystery of the Hexham Heads remains unsolved, suspended between archaeology, folklore, and the supernatural. What began as a child's discovery of 2 small carved stones evolved into a saga of sightings, unexplained movements, and encounters with something ancient, something that slipped briefly into the modern world. Whether the heads were relics, hoaxes, or ritual objects, the fear they left behind was very real. And the creature, to this day, people in Northumberland still claim to see shadows moving along old stone fences at night. Thank you for watching Dark Curiosity Hub. Tell us in the comments a topic you're curious about and want to know more about.